If you feel like you're an outcast in the family, but at the same time you're trying to change the habits in your family that are making them feel small or poor or less than, then you're a generational healer. Hello, welcome back to my podcast. This is Feeling My Feelings, where I finally feel my feelings. After years of dissociating, after years of basically trying to suppress my feelings because my family did not want to feel them, hear them, see them, have any acknowledgement that I was a feeling human being at all. The reason why I have to have a podcast about feeling my feelings is because, I never could before. My earliest story with my mom was basically still my mom being a judgmental bee. Literally, she said from the moment I was born and she held me in her arms, she looked at me and went, "This is going to be a difficult child." It was like intuitively, she knew that I would be the kid to challenge her limiting beliefs and to basically heal a significant amount of our family's trauma. I wear that with a badge of honor, knowing that is so my mom. To be like, in the first moments of my life, of my breath, she was already being like, this bitch, this little kid's gonna challenge me. Whatever, So to heal generational trauma, you gotta start recognizing the trauma responses and where they came from. I am first generation Filipino American. So my parents are the Asian immigrant bitches who did the thing where they came from poverty, came from a different country. They did know a lot of the English language though. So in the Philippines, they do teach you English. So that's an advantage they had. But they up and came to America, and they had to immediately change how they approached their careers. I mean, they came in at around like 30 or something, so around the age that I'm at right now, which is insane because it's like I feel like I'm coming into my true purpose and self in my 30s, where I feel like that's where they really did. But in terms of like all the trauma responses that they had, obviously they had all of this lack mindset. They had this overall feeling that you always need to plan and use your money as if you are poor. And if you know anything about law of attraction and manifestation, that continues to cultivate this mindset of, I don't have enough. And while it might save you, from overspending, it does not necessarily make you smarter with your money. It just makes you think over and over again that you do not have enough. It makes you mentally feel like you have to be in survival mode all the time. It makes you feel like you're always anxious. And so growing up, my family didn't have that many emotions except for be happy, don't cry, and also just overwhelming stress and anxiety. And so a lot of their trauma responses to things, like if something wasn't perfect, if something, money wise, like was like $2 more expensive than the original price, they'd be like, no, that's going to destroy your life. And there's such a domino effect of other traumas that come from lack mindset, that come from being in survival all the time. There is constant guilt, constant need to people please. If you think that just spending a little bit more on something, like in my family's case, they almost always bought things on sale. So if something was full priced, it would be like shame. It would be like, oh my God, I spent an extra $5 on this purse and I'm going to feel guilty about that. And I won't in the end actually like this person anymore. Or at work, you have to do everything your boss says, even though they're abusive, because I don't have enough money. I don't think anyone will like me enough to have enough money because I always have to people please in order to get money. And I don't know if I change jobs, if I'll ever get money again. So I have to do whatever it takes to be perfect, to not overspend, to basically get the bare minimum for myself so that I just survive. And in the end, if you hear all that, it all turns back into living in survival and no longer living to live for your own happiness and fulfillment. And unfortunately, that is so common amongst every single family. And with my family, coming from an actual like poverty state, coming from a country that already was meant to think lower of themselves. This was like my parents still call the Philippines a third world country here and there, even though that is a very outdated statement. But they have ingrained in themselves that they came from lesser origins. There's badassery that comes with that because they also know that they up and came from there and made it here. So boom. But also they still have this inner identity, like this identity where they had to be aware that they were quote unquote less than. And I don't want that anymore. So, since my family was in such survival mindset, that meant that they were always anxious. That meant that they were holding their body in tension all the time. They probably weren't present in their bodies all the time. And that manifests even like not even just mental health issues, but that manifests as body health issues. So, I mean, my dad had a heart issue. We've had generations of like heart disease, diabetes, and gut issues, gut and hormone imbalances. And with my mom, she was telling me that when she was around my age, when she was around like her 30s or so, she started noticing a lot of digestive issues. She was bloating a lot. But she also told me, I just ignored it. You know, you have to be tougher than that. You have to ignore the fact that this is happening to you so that you can move on and work, so you can make money, so that you can put food on the table for your kids. You just ignore it. And so right now, my mom is having full body eczema because she spent most of her life ignoring her health. And it's funny because now that I'm in my early 30s, I started to get gut health issues, and so did a lot of us. But I think this generation of people who are like, oh my God, I have health issues. Yeah, there's some things that may have changed in our food and our habits and in our anxieties or whatever. But I also think that previous generations all ignored it. And so we're finally being like, wait a minute, I'm bloating all the time. Maybe I should take care of this. And our healthcare providers have also started to be like, oh yeah, this is a problem. Maybe we should take care of this. And generationally, it's a lot better than our parents' generations when they were always sick. And so for me, I started noticing in my 30s that like, oh, I'm having gut issues. I'd tell my mom and she'd be like, that's nothing. I had that. It's fine. And then I started getting like these weird rashes all of a sudden whenever I was eating things that I was not previously allergic to. I was starting to get a lot of like bad pains in my body. I was starting to feel like I got stomach ulcers. I had all of these problems from overworking myself, from having mental health like issues, from having depression, trying to pull through it by just working, by just trying to move, by never fully addressing it, and just trying to be perfect, and just trying to work hard. And that's exactly what my mom did. And so she would tell me, you know, you just have to be tougher. You just have to do it anyway. You just have to ignore it. And after a couple of years of this, I kept getting in fights with my mom to the point where I would be buying supplements to help myself. She would look at them, she'd throw them in the trash and go, you don't have a problem. You're just basically weak. And the thing was, there are moments where, like this, where you and your parents' mindsets are going to clash on the most basic thing, and that is survival. And when you guys are clashing based on survival, it can feel impenetrable to actually get through to them, to the point where you think, my parent doesn't care about me. My parent doesn't love me. There are some situations where, you know, it's up to you to determine it, where the parent is a lot more abusive. There are some cases where they're so dissociated, where they're so maybe ignorant, when they're so blocked that they can't see that something is hurting their child emotionally. All they can see is what is best for your survival. And so I have gotten in so many fights with my mom based on me spending money on my health. And it's pretty ridiculous because I'm at a point where when you try to take care of your gut health, I'm sorry if you guys are GI specialists or some people out there. I'll just say that people have controversial opinions about how to handle your gut health. And I just think that conventional medicine didn't really help me. And so I turned to having to pay out of pocket for helping my health. And my mom thought that was ridiculous. Also, my mom, true blue Filipina, is now a retired registered nurse. So she's like, well, I should know everything. I was a nurse. She also has gut issues and has full body eczema. So did she really know everything? No. So, okay, this is turning into a long episode, but a long special episode. But anyway, it just feels like for years, my mom was in denial of the fact that there was a different, maybe even better way to survive that I seemed to unlock that she wasn't able to. And not only is that hard to break someone's like intense survival method, but it also just brings up feelings of like, wow, I could have done all this, but I'm so far gone into my health and to my habits that I guess there's not as much hope for me. And that's such a sad sacrifice. It's annoying to hear this phrase, but it is the truth. People can only do the best they can with what they have and what they know. And so I finally started to understand this, to finally feel this about my family. And I think the only reason why I stopped reacting, I stopped feeling emotionally, or at least the only reason why it started to heal now is because I finally started to build up my own habits and to start distancing my emotional habits, my mental habits from theirs. And I know, like, obviously you have to do that, but it's really quite sad because it's so easy to get re-triggered by your family because they're the ones that started it. And in my case, I actually had to move back in with my family, like in my late 20s. And I had to be faced with the fact that they're going to re-trigger me into my basic survival mode again until the point where I can learn how to not react in the same way. So for example, if I were to cry about a health issue, my mom would just be like, oh my God, stop. Everybody has that. And I would yell at her for saying that to me. And this would be our pattern since I was probably 10 up until maybe I was 30, like on different levels. But we would have this ongoing fight where I'd be like, no, I have a valid feeling. And she'd be like, no, you don't. Shut up. You're causing your own problems by feeling your feelings. Hence the reason why I have this podcast. Also, sidebar, isn't it beautiful how my traumas became a thing that hopefully potentially fuels money for me? Lovely. These things can come back around. They can help you. Whatever it is, there is, I was going to say there's fortune in your trauma, but honestly, whatever you grow through, you can help other people with it, which is your purpose. And then in the end, gives you some sort of abundance and allows you to live in this world more safely. So your healing in that way is a path to your abundance and your survival. Okay? So anyway, I might be all over the place and I might have to re-record this. But anyway, it just feels like me and my mom had this constant pattern of yelling at each other, basically battling different perspectives of how to survive. And where my mom was just like, don't feel anything. You can't feel anything. If you do, you'll let your guard down. and then you won't know how to stabilize yourself. You won't be mentally well enough to work, and then you won't be able to survive. So you can't feel anything. And then me, I'm like, well, actually, it seems as though when you feel things, you get to move through them faster. You might gain another perspective. You might have more openness, less stress. You might be able to have more room then to learn more skills, to work harder, to become more abundant. She didn't get that. So I had lived with my parents for the past couple of years, had this on and off ongoing battle where I kept getting frustrated, where I kept feeling like, but you're my mom. And if you really cared about me, you would try to understand this about myself. And in the end, it was the fact that she was so stuck on her survival methods that she couldn't hear me. But I think she was always frustrated. She was always trying to do other things like cook or, do what she could to financially provide for me. And it was her only way of showing anything, because how at that point in her life is she going to turn around, change all of her habits, all of her survival habits in order to fully show up for me? Because she didn't know how to show up for herself in the same way. And so after years of trying to undo my own mental, emotional imbalances around that, actually having to live with them pushed me to start to change my mindsets, to start to change and regulate myself. So I wouldn't keep responding to her. I wouldn't keep expecting the same things from her that she couldn't do. And it has been the hardest thing in my life to figure out that I have to let go of the thought that they could give me more security. And that is the plight of the generational healer. So just a lot of stuff that I had to do in healing myself in order to heal my relationship with my family and relationship with the world, and to bring more generational healing and wealth to my future. Bitch, I had to do a lot of shadow work. So obviously that is looking into your traumas and all of the family stuff. But a lot of it is also realizing that it's your responsibility to build an identity, a whole identity that most likely sheds everything else. That's where I'm at right now. And it's so confusing because you have to let go of how you learn to receive love, of all the habits that you picked up in order to defend your insecurities. You have to let go of your identity as a person who won't make money off of creative talent. You have to let go of your identity as an empath that always is being controlled by manipulators. You have to start letting go of this old story, this old identity that you had of yourself. But there's so much work that goes into, I have to literally write my own story, but I have to literally do everything different. I have to move different. And the way this is manifesting quite literally in my body right now is interesting because I've had to fix my physical body from the inside out. So I was talking about having health issues in my gut. Well, I've done several rounds of fixing my gut health only to find that my body is out of alignment, a lot of posture issues, a lot of overexerting my body that is also causing me a lot of gut issues. So I'm having to literally stop sitting and walking and sleeping in a tense way. I have to change the way I literally move. How many times have I said literally? Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I had to change the way that I actually move in life. Sometimes I have breathing problems because of my posture. And so I actually have to relearn how to breathe, take in and breathe out life. It's all fucking symbolic. It's insane, And so I realized that a lot of the way that I move, if I am very mental in order to help myself survive, I have to overthink and be anxious in a way to survive, or at least that's the way I was. That's a lot of what my family was doing. And we all have this sort of like uptight shoulder, forward neck posture. We have gut issues. We have bad hips. We have like all these generational things that you could say are genetic, but are also being acted upon, because of our mindsets. So for me, I've done several rounds of physical therapy only to realize that I was moving in a certain way and like I needed other help, which is also out of pocket, just like my gut health. And I've been taking so much time, especially in the past 5 years, to look at how I want to live and literally survive differently. I've had to drastically change my diet because of my gut health. It's not how I'm going to live forever, but I had to eat the healthiest I had to, cut out everything. And then I had to take a lot less time going out, driving everywhere, doing things that are strenuous to my body. I had to sit down and rest more. And again, I think that was mostly during my transition time. There was a period of time where I had to absolutely isolate myself for a while. And in taking care of my body and my gut health, it made me have to change all of these limiting beliefs I had in myself, where it was like, all these people don't care about me. Why should I care about healing myself? And it took me having to risk my body's health to realize I have to be the only one to take care of myself. And that's so sad. And that was a point that I think my mom reached too, but she decided to ignore a lot of the other stuff, and she just said the only way to survive was to work. And so for me, I have the luxury also of falling back on my mom whenever, when I had to live with her. So I was given the space to work on my emotional and mental health and not just think about survival. And so for that, I'm very grateful. And for that, I think this is really important. Even if your parents don't realize it, they did all the base survival, like root chakra, like bottom, like base part of the hierarchy of needs stuff, so that you had enough room to be emotional, so that you had enough room to be to care about your mental health. Whereas they don't think that that's important. That's actually the new life that they came here for. That's actually the new life they built for their children, to have enough space for that. My parents got to the point where they were the absolute masters of survival. And I will say that because I get to say that because they were the ones, the main people in their families, honestly, that came from the Philippines and immigrated to America. I mean, a lot of my cousins and my aunts and uncles still do really well in the Philippines, so obviously, like, good on them. But my parents were really the ones to do the real cultural shift that turned into an identity shift, that turned into a change in our family line's trajectories on both sides. And when you really get into more generational healing, when you're able to start healing all the traumas around how your parents have misunderstood you, when you start to allow that to not cloud you as much, you start to see the sort of beauty in how things are kind of cyclical and they like unravel in a certain way. I don't know if that made sense, but I think it's really interesting that they are the generational healers of their family line. And yet I still have the issues with them. And I think that's a lot of us who are faced with, especially like boomers and some Gen X as well. But most of us still have, or a lot of us still have boomer parents or elder people in our lives. And they themselves were trying to break some curses. And so for my family to break that curse, for my parents in particular to break that curse, they had mastered what they needed to. And honestly, a lot of their big purpose in life. And so it's very hard to look at them and be like, you're still not enough in some ways for me. And there is so much guilt in between generations when that comes up. And I fear that for whenever if I ever have a future child or whatever, it's like my parents did so much fucking work only to be told, yeah, but there's still more work to do. You know how hard that is? If it's down to survival and that much survival, to break out of that is so much mental work, so much strength, so much to do. And at the very least, at this time in their life, they might not have seen this earlier, but I want to say in the past 5 years or so, it's finally hitting them that this generation, that my generation is meant to take that torch of getting past survival and moving it towards starting to live within your purpose, starting to get better mental health and emotional health. And I am really thankful that I got to be that end of the generational timeline, where the space between me and my mom is her surviving most of her life and then hitting like her 70s and going, oh, okay, maybe emotions matter now. Where I probably spent the first 25 years of my life going, oh, survival, oh, impress people, maybe emotions matter. I'm not sure, up until my 30s, where I'm like, wait, yeah, emotions and mental health really matter. And maybe I should really take care of myself and my health. And that is, like a full 35 plus years ahead of when it hit my mom. So then I sort of see the future and go, I wonder if then my future child or whatever goes on after me, I don't know if I'll have a child, but other people in my generational line in the future, it'll be interesting to see them grow up with this feeling of emotions and mental health matter. So right now I'm in a really significant... Yes, I am playing with my hair more. So right now I am in a significant area of my life where I have gone through some of the most abusive relationships, friendships, bosses, and moments with my family, to the point where I could no longer take the most toxic behavior possible. And then I started to move through and evolve the types of people that were around me. There was a tier above super toxic where things were still kind of codependent, where I still didn't quite have the grasp on my sense of self yet, but it was not as bad, but still had really bad habits. And then I went a tier more evolved and healthier. And I realized that there were still workplaces, friendships, relationships that were somewhat controlling, somewhat manipulative, where they could be justified, where it was down to the fact that I needed to respond in a more balanced way and not be as reactive, not fall into as much depression, as much self-deprecation and victim mode as I did before. And so those were a lot of habits that I had before, where I would easily think, I have no power in my life. I am such a victim. There's no power, there's no voice in this moment, and I've never been in situations where I had one. So why should I keep trying? And so I was moving through different levels of that with all places in my life, up until right now, where I feel like I'm finally starting to respond in more of a confident, self-confident mode, even if I haven't fully built my voice and my sense of self yet. I mean, we spend our whole lives doing that. But I have let go of a lot of my victim mode. I have let go of a lot of these habits where I was so dependent on other people in order to survive. Not even just dependent, but I've started to let go of this idea that other people should show up for me more. It's been hard because what is left for me to work on is knowing that there will be people around me that I can depend on. And it's also that I can build survival by myself and much more than that. What's left for me to work on is building this fuller self that isn't so dependent on others, that can fall back on herself and doesn't need to be, and isn't always falling out of security because of other people. I have to build more boundaries around that image of myself, around my habits. I have to, now that I have started to heal my body more, I've started to heal my gut health more, and I have to build within my life a lot more boundaries around taking care of my body, of not falling onto hustle mode and like overworking myself as a good reason to destroy my body. I ended up really good at perfectionism. I ended up really good at losing my identity in order to survive. I became somewhat of a master survivalist myself. And now I am, like, thankfully in a better space where I have more control over my own life. And in that way, I have healed a lot of the habits that most generations of my family have had, so that I can start ushering in this new mindset of, you get to survive based on yourself. You get to build and thrive based on who you are, what your life is. So that's why. So it's going to be a process for me to really act on and start living based on the sense of self that I want to build. And of course, I'm going to fall back on old habits. And it is kind of human too when you get to different situations in life, even if that isn't a main trauma that you had. But I think I really did a lot of inner work. My relationship with my family is a lot better because of that as well. And I am really proud that I was a difficult child. And I wonder if I'm gonna fall into a lot of conflict with a future child that I have. I wonder how much more there is to do in the next generations. I don't know, but I will say, especially the millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha generations, we're all starting to usher in this sort of section of like feeling your feelings, of having emotions, allowing yourself to become wealthier. It is allowing yourself to know your value. So yeah, I think in my next episodes, I'm going to break down how to change your money mindset, how to change like your mindset around your own worthiness and value, and also how to navigate your own spiritual journey and self-transformation. So that's, even though I talked a little bit about that today, that wasn't the whole thing. So I will talk about that more in another episode. But until next time, peace and love. Bye-bye.